Have you tried Music to Code By yet? Well, why not? Here's a comment Joe left on the website. This is also great music to mow by. I like listening to music while doing yard work to help the monotony of it seem less tedious. This past summer, I started listening to these tracks while doing yard work, and they worked great. I could let the music play in the background without focusing on it, and it seemed to help me concentrate on getting through my tasks. Thanks, Joe. And now you can download the entire 13-track collection. That's over 5.5 hours of music to code by for only $39. Check it out at musictocodeby.net. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we're still in Oslo.
We like it here.
How could two guys stay in Oslo for months and months and months?
We're already getting the married couple comments from a few folks who just face-to-face flunking away all the time.
This comes out August 10th, and tomorrow's my birthday. I'll be 50.
There you go. Happy birthday, my friend. You'll be 50 years old.
I'll be playing with the band, the Franklin Brothers Band, at the Windjammer. Right. In Mesquamaket, Rhode Island, right on the beach, and having a big bash. That's
awesome.
That's
and I'll be in Australia.
Yeah. We just keep missing each other.
Yeah, there you go. It's funny how time shifting works.
Yep. Well, anyway, let's roll the music, because I got something good for Better Know Framework.
Awesome. All right, man, what do you got?
Well, this is the same day that I had breakfast with James Montemagno.
Oh, nice.
And I asked him what his favorite plugins for Xamarin were, because he made a bunch of them.
He has.
And he said by far his favorite, and it was the first plugin he did, and it's still the best, is the Settings plugin.
Interesting. Okay.
So now you got a Xamarin app. Let's say it's a Xamarin Forms app. You just pull this plugin into the PCL app, which is your UI part, and you can do settings on every platform. And it's just one code base, one line of code, and it works everywhere. And that's just a simple thing. But, they're all different. iOS, Android, Windows, they all have their own APIs, and it just abstracts it all away. So there you go, the Settings plugin.
It's cool, dude.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it.
That's what I got. Who's talking to us?
Grabbed a comment off show 966, the one we did back in April of 2014 with one Nicholas Blumhardt, where we were talking about structured logging.
How odd.
How strange indeed. Yeah. Who would do that? Nobody would do that. And this comment, which is only a year old, because the show is 3 years old, this comment's a year old, and it's from Tom Atwood, who says, "Hi, Carl and Richard and Nicholas. I hope all is well. Hey, thanks for asking. Things are good. We're working a lot, though."
Yeah. What a nice guy.
That's very nice.
He's very concerned.
You'd almost send him a mug or something. I don't know.
We should.
Strange. That's a good idea. I like that.
I like that idea.
I listened to the show regarding Serilog with Nicholas when it aired, and I've come back to the comments section, 2 years later, as we just had one of those, quote, religious discussions in the office regarding the various logging frameworks.
Right.
And by the way, I'm kind of flattered that, he's like, oh, they did a show and went back and found it.
Yep.
And looked at Serilog, ETW, Slab, Nlog, Log4net, and so forth. There seems to be much disagreement about the proper way for doing logging in apps, whether an enterprise or not, as well as the tools that can be used for supporting logging. Sec has getsec.net, for example. In addition to the desire to keep things simple, using something like Serilog, sometimes it's dismissed by those engineers that feel a Microsoft-supported but seemingly more complex approach, for example, Slab, the one that's basically deprecated now, should be used. In addition, with .NET Core, it seems that the simpler approaches, like Serilog, may be flavored, although I may be wrong on that too. Any chance we could get a logging show in the near future? A revisit with Nicholas or some others of various logging options and approaches would be very helpful.
Nah.
We can't do that.
No, we can't do
Sorry,
that.
Tom.
No
way
way
to do that.
Sorry.
I really apologize, but no chance at all.
There's no way.
All right, Tom, it may have taken you a year, but you got your wish. We got Nicholas back, and On top of that, I'm going to send you a .NET Rocks mug. So .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you, and if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Facebook and Google+, and if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. And send us a tweet. We shred them for your protection.
Nice.
What does a tweet sound like when it goes through the shredder? No, it's more like...
Isn't that how you make
Like
a cat
that.
go woof? Is you pour gasoline on them, set them on fire?
Oh, dude, that is so bad. You can't tell that joke. That's like a horrible joke.
Well, then there's also how you make a dog sound like a cat. You freeze them with liquid nitrogen and saw them in half. Meow. This is what happens when we shoot shows all day.
You just tickled me because I used to tell that joke when I was 10.
There you go.
10.
This is what happens when we shoot shows all day.
That was back in the Ford administration, for Christ's sake. All right, let's formally introduce Nicholas Blumhardt. He's a keen developer, technologist, and entrepreneur with experience building large-scale platform software at Microsoft, developer tools including SEC and Octopus Deploy, and a wide range of consumer and enterprise software systems. Nick has had a long involvement with... his head is exploding.
It's exploding.
Yeah.
Nick has had a long involvement with open source software and .NET by founding projects like AutoFac, Serilog, and Sprache, that's Sprache, and working on some of the first open source components of the .NET Base Class Library, or BCL. Nick is co-founder of Data Lust and maintains a technical blog at nblumhardt.com. That's NBLUMHARDT.com. Welcome back.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Bit too long, sir.
Yeah.
That's 2014 though. That is a really long time ago. I mean,
Yeah, and here you are, still doing the Serilog things. You're doing a session here on Serilog.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been chipping away at it for a long time, but I realized that with all this open source work, it's writing the code is always just the first part of a
Tiny
long
piece
process.
of the equation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Sure.
code that nobody uses and nobody hears about is not worth much at all. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you create a lot more work for yourself when they actually do use it and complain about it and tell you
Yeah.
how you did it all wrong and how they're angry with you for not making it the way they want you to make it for you. And
That's it.
Stop
But
me if you've heard any of this before.
no, but 4 years down the track, at least I can spread a bit of the blame now.
Nice.
Yeah, quite a few people have been working on Serilog with me in the last.
Any comments on
Yes, sir.
Tom's comment? Just
It sounds like a minefield to me, honestly. So many options. I think I don't know. There's so many interesting technologies in this space.
Isn't it funny that
I just-
people think that there's a proper way to do something that there's a million and one ways to do?
Yeah, I just came out of an ETW talk, and that's a completely different approach to the same kind of
Sure.
subject matter.
Yes.
But if you're writing a device driver for Windows or something like that, I mean,
Yeah.
Serilog or Log4Net or whatever is not going to be in the
We're
equation.
going to
So
be talking with Dina in a week.
yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, no one right way. And I remember when we were talking about 2014, it was like, look, you're only going to put so many cycles to think about logging. If you go this path, then you're not stuck. There's
Yeah.
so many ways to actually propagate that log, whether you stick it in a SQL Server, or dump it to a file, push it to ETW. Like
That's
you have
it.
all the choices in the world.
Yeah, I think as much as we love building these things, the more they stay out of the way, the better in the long run.
Yeah,
I
the
think,
goal of your app was not to create log files.
no,
Oddly enough.
no, exactly. Yeah, yeah, but making it disappear into the background like that actually takes a ridiculous amount of work.
Yeah.
a lot of effort.
We do humanitarian toolbox line. Outcomes, not outputs.
Right.
And your software's supposed to have an outcome. It's almost inevitably going to have an output, but that's not what you should measure it by.
So the typical application for Serilog is you want to just take all of the things that you want to log in a single entry, and maybe you've got a class already, but maybe you don't. Maybe you just make up your own class and hang a bunch of properties off it that reflect all the data you want to save and just put it in.
Yeah, I don't think you don't even really need to go that far most of the time. It's Serilog's very much like, it was designed to be as much like Log4Net as you could excuse at that point in time, in that it's like you just write out text in the classical kind of logging statement, but with just a few little twists to make sure that the values that go into that message can still be extracted without having to parse the later on with regex or anything crazy like that. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And so it's the ability to query the log.
It is all about
afterwards.
querying.
That's really what it's about.
No, I don't think anyone gets any value out of writing the logs. It's really when I mean, it's crazy how diagnostics, especially in production, is like the single most stressful thing that pretty much any of us do in our programming jobs.
By far.
Yeah.
Although also enjoyable. Like if you like a murder mystery.
Yeah. but we shouldn't make it any harder for ourselves than it already has to be. I think like when the chips are down, the clock is ticking, you know.
We actually really want a resolution. Yeah,
that's why I love building this stuff, I think, because like shaving minutes or hours off of that resolution time.
That diagnostic process.
Yeah, it improves people's lives. It's cool. It's a cool thing.
You got to get occasional happy grams from somebody saying, "Hey, your logging framework saved my bacon today."
yeah, occasional. Yeah, definitely.
How many do you get? Your logging framework threw me under the bus today. Not zero.
Oh, I don't know. Negligible.
Yeah, how much trouble can you really get into a logging framework?
True, right.
You can't write software without somebody disagreeing with your decisions, and
if they agree all the time, maybe you haven't done a good job.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
So, has it evolved much? I mean, since 2014, is Serilog still Serilog?
The core idea probably hasn't evolved a lot at all. I mean, there's a fellow raised a point in the talk I gave on Serilog yesterday that historically logging libraries and all of those sorts of diagnostic tools have been condemned to eventually become as complex as the system that they're supposedly instrumenting.
That's kind of a law of reverse entropy right there, isn't it?
Yeah, so Serilog, it's, the evolution is mostly making it work better. We did go through a bit of a churn period where we spent a year keeping up with the different versions of .NET Core, and we really wanted to be there when it shipped because the ASP.NET guys have produced such a great lot of like hooks in the ASP.NET Core framework for this stuff, and so Serilog was a really good pairing with that, but it took a lot of effort for the community.
So I got to think that when we interviewed in 2014, you were in a good state, because the next year when Core started coming out, and that like 8 or 9 supposed beta versions that were more like alphas, that must have been very tough on you if you were going to try and keep up.
Yeah, I guess the flip side is that it's a good way to get in depth and learn a new technology, trying to support it at that deep integration level.
Oh yeah, so you're deeply immersed in Core.
Yeah, and you can't take that perspective away again when you've seen how something evolves. You sort of understand a little bit of the forces that drove the design, and so it's not quite so.
I'm trying to think of the things that could go wrong in a logging framework, and the only thing I can really come up with is a disk failure, either out of disk space or your disk fails or something. And
or the simple things like that. A lot of people don't believe that a logging framework should ever throw exceptions, for instance. I mean, you don't want the thing that's going to diagnose failures actually causing them. So
you do want to know that your disk is bad or borked or full or whatever.
Yeah, most of the time though, that's a matter for some kind of system monitoring tool to reveal that, because logging, I think, once the disk is full, just has to shut up, I think. And, Yep.
You're still going to get someone angry at you that you didn't log.
Yeah, I don't think so many people are using file-based logging though anymore, just because once you've got right-sized services and those sorts of things, you've got apps that are spread over a lot of machines and a lot of like little processes, and
what does log even look like in the microservice world?
Yeah, it's horrible.
A separate log for every service? Woo!
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, so I think centralized is the typical sort of way to use
Serilog. And that's something Serilog does pretty painlessly, that you would have a central logging point.
It was born into that kind of environment. But there are something like 100 different outputs now. I was just looking at Postgres. Yeah, we've got like 100 syncs, I think, that you can send. Not all written by Serilog. About half of those, I think, have been done by the project.
So we log it to a SQL server, and then we have a transaction log.
Yeah,
now we have a log of logs.
Yeah. I've actually been looking at Postgres.
If you put some music to it, you'd have a logorithm.
Well, SQL Server and Postgres have both been adding JSON support quite heavily, and so especially I've looked into Postgres more of the two, and so when you've got log data that's kind of semi-structured and you've got a bag of properties associated with an event, you can get in there and really kind of query that first class in modern databases. So
nice.
But there's lots of other different options. Obviously, I couldn't even imagine though how there's a need for 100 different logging outputs,
Yeah,
but
no,
obviously
that's crazy.
everybody does different.
I'm just pulling up the provided syncs, not all of them.
Yeah,
akka, alternate rolling file, CloudWatch,
Yeah.
DynamoDB, Kinesis, Azure Application Insights.
Talking about everything that runs.
Yeah,
everywhere,
no kidding.
You know.
That's the list goes on and on and on.
This is the cool thing about like the way Serilog is designed. We took a little bit more of a batteries not included approach in the end, and so a lot of stuff just isn't in the box, and because it's not in the box, it doesn't favor an implementation that comes from the project, and so people are encouraged to go and write their own providers that plug in.
That makes a lot of sense.
And in most cases have already written, so you can grab it and go.
Yeah, and the nice thing about that is people write them and maintain them and support them, and it spreads a bit of the load in a really natural way. So people using different targets kind of go to the maintainer for the sync that they're using rather than all having to come to some central place. So because the maintenance and support in open source is obviously I guess one of the many hidden costs.
It's some care and feeding. I'm just going to have to take a look at your project for a second, look at all the contributors and the current stack of issues, because that tells you a lot about the state of a project. You know,
I think we've got one of the same problems that I think ASP.NET and .NET has at the moment, though, where we've split work across so many repositories now. I think we've got 80 contributors or so listed on the core repository, but actually there are 209 contributors over 59 repositories.
Wow.
I think now. So, I mean, it's obviously the numbers are not comparable to what you get in a big project like .NET. But,
is Serilog an aspect-oriented log?
No.
Something that you have to deliberately call.
You do need to deliberately call it, but I think that you need to try to include a lot of semantic information in a log event before someone, or yourself usually, months down the track is going to be able to tell what that was really supposed to mean. So the aspect-oriented stuff is really interesting, but
it's not as deliberate, obviously. And
it's good if you're doing some kind of local diagnostic session where you just want every method call to be logged, and you can go and arrange that in some kind of call graph or something. But I mean, for Serilog, I think just crafting up really good, meaningful events is better because you keep the volume of data down and make it easier to. I mean, sifting through logs is the pits.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And there's always this battle between I didn't instrument enough and holy smokes, look at how many entries this is.
Yeah. It is. And I think the surprising thing is as well that people always kind of allocate a whole pile of iron to their SQL Server or their database or whatever is kind of seen as the central data store for an app. And then you realize that they're producing probably 10 log events per transaction, and those have to go somewhere. And in fact, the logging infrastructure is probably, and it should be the largest thing.
Yeah, it's probably more resource intensive than the database itself.
Yeah, which is something I didn't really anticipate going into learning about this stuff. Yeah.
Do you think the norm is too much logging then?
I think the norm is probably too much careless logging. I mean, every log that I open up is generally dominated by one pretty much meaningless event repeated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times.
That nobody's ever going to actually take an action on. I guess that's the question is, when is a log entry valuable?
To make myself produce better logs, I force myself to read them during development. So I write some code, I test the code with unit tests, but then my sort of pseudo integration test is usually to then go and run through a scenario and just make sure that the logs the system produces actually first to make sure that the system's doing what I think it's doing, but then to make sure that there's enough information there I can go and figure out what's going wrong later on down the track.
Right.
So I think that shift left idea in DevOps seems to be kind of across the board in development. Like the earlier that you look at something and the earlier you spot problems and improve quality, the more you benefit from it.
And it's, that early stage to engage with operations and to talk about how are we going to instrument this? How are we going to measure success? How are we going to diagnose problems? What do you folks want to see? How do you go about it today?
Is figuring out what to log and when an art form, you think, or is it something that you can naturally come to, but with some rules?
I try not to overthink it because I hope that logging mostly is something that you can do with a relatively low kind of slice of your attention while you're writing the code that matters. But I think here's
a good example, right? So let's say I'm writing something where I'm processing 25 frames a second of something. Maybe it's a game, maybe it's a Connect or something. I don't know, whatever. And you want to log things that happen, but not every one of them, right? So now you have to like set up a, maybe a counter, and if mod 10 is 0,
then log something out.
Then log something,
I spend a lot more time though thinking about logging as almost like a trail of breadcrumbs, or if you think about all the work that a complex system's doing at once, there are all these little causal chains going on, like a request is getting handled, or a message is getting processed in a back end, or something like that. And you need your logs to provide some way of correlating between those things. So given an error that occurred during a processing of a request, I might want to find everything that happened alongside it during the same request. And then I might find an order ID that was placed, and then I need to go and look at all the rest of the logs in the system, and maybe I find something that happened in a back-end message handler, and then I navigate along the message ID axis, and I find, so setting up those correlation schemes is probably the thing that takes the most.
Is there a queue built in?
Into Serilog?
Yeah.
There's a kind of a base implementation that a lot of the syncs use that does so all of the syncs that do any kind of network I/O generally buffer events on a background thread, buffer events into a queue, and then a background thread goes and flushes those out.
So they're not blocking.
Yeah, people frequently come and ask, can you make this async, without probably realizing that we don't really do any I/O on the thread that you're calling log on.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but
interesting point.
We've resisted async pretty strongly, but
why do it if you don't need to? If you're gonna, that's right. It's gonna come back immediately. It is for all intents and purposes, it is async.
Yeah, and it puts a lot of sort of onus on the caller to properly handle those tasks and things.
Right.
Yeah.
Hold that thought, Nicholas, for just a second while we take a minute to pay the bills.
This episode of .NET Rocks is made possible in part by Windows on the Google Cloud Platform.
What? Isn't this a .NET show?
Yeah, .NET runs on the Google Cloud Platform, man.
Everything in .NET?
You bet. All the .NET Core libraries and more, including 200 plus Google.com and cloud services. Hey, John Skeet's behind it. He's a genius.
The John Skeet? The Rescue the Princess John Skeet from Stack Overflow?
Yeah, the one and only. You can deploy your ASP.NET Windows apps to Compute Engine or your ASP.NET Core apps to App Engine or Container Engine, which is Google's hosted Kubernetes environment, and it runs like, Google.
But what about Visual Studio integration? Oh, it's there. I'm reading it now. You can use Visual Studio to manage your GCP resources and deploy your existing apps.
Yep. You can get stack driver logging, error reporting, and tracing support for .NET and .NET Core.
Also, there are PowerShell commandlets for GCP, which run on Windows and Linux.
And if you need help, there are a great set of partners to get workloads to GCP, including Capgemini, Nudezic, and Magenic.
So go to gcp.netrocks.com and get your free trial today.
.NET on Google. Who knew?
You're listening to .NET Rocks. Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell here, and Nicholas Blumhardt's with us talking about Serilog again. And what's new? 100 syncs or more.
Yep, that's a lot of syncage.
And talking about, what's a good strategy for figuring out what to log and when.
I do think, maybe we haven't emphasized this enough, but that threading issue, that issue of these 15 log entries amongst the 100 other ones all represent the same transaction or the same execution path of workflow.
Yeah.
It's not a small problem. I've done most of my high-velocity work around web, and we always use the session cookie token as sort of the identifier to make sure that when you had a problem with a transaction, you grabbed all the log entries for that token.
Yeah. A lot of schemes. I remember back in the days of using WCF, there would be a kind of a correlation ID scheme built into WCF that the framework would kind of attach these identifiers that flowed through. I think the challenge is that there's just so many more diagnostic scenarios than you can kind of guess at in advance, and so Serilog takes a really different approach by just trying to allow you to attach as much kind of contextual information into log events as possible. So it's
because you do talk about being structured as well, so you need structures around those identifiers.
Yeah, it's difficult to maintain those sorts of things across a whole code base without them being, yet another kind of central point of like a
Contention,
list of
yeah.
another kind of thing that causes merge conflicts when
Right.
people are working together. So I don't know. Serilog doesn't take a position on that so much.
But if I'm writing async await code, like we don't even know what order the log entries might come in at. We don't know anything.
Yeah. We've got the Serilog has a fair few kind of like hooks for carrying data across async continuations and those sorts of things. It's had to take on all of that, I guess, by being kind of developed at the time that all of that was coming into the framework.
Right.
It's a challenging task. I don't think it's not by any means a solved problem. That's the other surprising thing. We've been writing log events in applications for decades and decades, and I think we're just conditioned to accept the status quo a bit because it's kind of good enough.
Right.
It's largely been seen as good enough. We write out text to the console, and we might pipe that into some kind of text-based search index that we can go and get some kind of overview from later on. But there's a lot of wasted effort in the whole process, and I think Serilog's attacking that from a few angles with message templates, which it shares with with other libraries like ASP.NET Core, and with there's an nlog beta that's coming along that's got support for the same style of structured logging as Serilog.
Nice.
So that angle of making the events themselves easy to mechanically process is one of them. But I don't think it's the last improvement we're going to make.
No.
We're certainly not yet in log nirvana.
I think one of the problems with logging is it's got the bicycle shed problem. Like everybody logs or should log, and everybody thinks logging's easy.
Yeah, and it's easy to rat hole on like trivial issues without seeing the big picture, which is wasted effort, or which is the lack of the kind of overarching pattern or strategy for making use of those logs later on. It's like,
and I appreciate that you guys have done a lot right, but I still got to think there's got to be some discipline about when you call it, how you call it, and how you make sure there are identifiers. That's got to be a process piece. It can't really be codified.
I guess the thing that I realized about logging as I started working with Serilog is that it's a software engineering task that's kind of on par, and maybe the recent focus that instrumentation has in general and performance and like distributed diagnostics really point out that whole process is as important a piece of kind of software engineering as designing your entity model for a database or anything else. Maybe even more critical. So things like the Google SRE book and other things that have popped up lately have been good for kind of highlighting just how much energy, especially large companies like Google, are putting into really making good logging and monitoring infrastructure.
You sort of talk about the enterprise architect ritual, or really any architectural ritual of getting ready for an app or taking those things on, where we talk through a naming strategy and we talk through a tool set and so forth. Logging's got to be on that list.
Yeah, it does. I think that we disdain it a little bit because it has just been such a futile waste of energy so much in the past, because there's just a limit to how many regular expressions a developer can write in a day. And you spend a little time digging around in that, and you think, well, this is not software engineering.
Yes.
And I think that's one thing that Serilog avoids and maybe elevates the whole, and not just Serilog, but we're talking about Slab, unfortunately, which is discontinued, and ETW, which is obviously not.
Yeah, it's part of the OS.
Yeah, there's some improvements there, and they're pretty, I guess, pretty serious technologies to be able to handle what we're asking of them these days.
That's site reliability engineering, and I grabbed a link for the show notes just because it's actually an O'Reilly book, although Google's got a license to let you read it online for free.
Yeah.
And it's just, I like the term because it makes you as a developer think more in context of people are going to have to operate this software that you've written. Let's think about what it means to make that software reliable in an executable mode.
There are some super interesting ideas in the book around really allowing a budget for kind of manual effort and toil, as it's called. Toil, yeah. And once you're past that budget of spending so much time on these toiling tasks, you need to go back and apply engineering to reduce it.
And I think that's technical debt.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The shortcut taken by a developer for very good reason, typically to make a deadline, now gets manifest in operations as an ongoing manual piece of toil. And if you don't capture that and accumulate it to show its cost, it's hard to get budget to go back and remediate that debt.
it would be lovely if there was always a consistent way to measure technical debt like that, wouldn't there? I mean, maybe having sort of time sheeting could be one way, and I think that's the kind of impression I get from the book. But yeah, just being able to quantify how much energy is going into technical debt would just be so useful to justify. You know.
It's a DevOpsy thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's definitely a talking point in stuff like the Phoenix Project and stuff about just documenting work. That so much IT work, because each of those toils is relatively small, never gets documented. And so if you get into a ritual, and I've done this with a team with Post-it notes. It's like, don't even get up for your desk, just write it on a Post-it note, and then, when you go for coffee, take those Post-it notes and put it on what is ultimately a Kanban board, but it's just it's showing a post-Kanban board of what we did.
Right.
And then you start to get this, the average dev is going to put out a Post-it note or two a day for the items they worked on. But the average IT guy, especially frontline guy, it's 30, 40, 50 to flipping things. And suddenly it's like, when I filled up a wall with Post-it notes that way, and I had different color codings based on who was in what role.
Right.
And so it was the yellow ones that was all the IT guys. And somebody said, "What is this?" I said, "This is technical debt manifest as labor."
It's actually worse if you make them puce.
I just don't know what color that is.
We once had a strategy where we had a tiny little portable whiteboard which we could pass around our team as the technical debt register.
Nice.
And so you would write your little piece of technical debt on the board, but if there wasn't any room to write the technical debt that you just incurred,
couldn't do it.
you couldn't do it. So you had to get one thing off first, and it was the Kanban system. But
Awesome.
I love that.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yes, it's time for me to swear that I will not stoop to the obvious jokes about finding the number of laughs in the log file coming up 0, or the number of listeners that laughed at my previous jokes being 0. You have my word. I will not tell that joke. So let's just move on.
Well, I know I feel better.
All right. It's actually time to give away DevExpress D-Experience subscription to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. And check out their new DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM, state controllers like Redux and all that. And it supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. You can check it out and test it for free by getting it from GitHub. Learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
All right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner is Ben Osborne.
Congratulations, Ben. Golf clap for you, sir.
Ben just won the DevExpress D-Experience subscription, a big pile of awesome from them, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world. In every show, we like to give away stuff from our sponsors, and every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of said fan club. But you got to sign up to win. And Nick, it's been a while since we asked you this question. If you had $5,000 to spend on technology, what would you buy?
I think I would be stuck at replacing my favorite microphone, which unfortunately somehow was lost in the dark distant past, moving between houses and the like.
What was it?
So it was a Rode. I can't remember.
Wow.
We've got a great little company that makes microphones in Australia.
$5,000
I don't think
on a mic.
actually I couldn't spend $5,000.
I
You
think
know what?
you could.
Actually,
You could
No.
on a Neumann,
no, but I probably couldn't.
Yeah.
But
You couldn't look yourself in the eye if you did, is what you're saying.
yeah, if I've got anything left over, I would put it towards my Surface Studio. But,
There's the quick $4,000. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
but
I just got to jump on B&H Photo, which also has great collections of gear for audio, to say, hey, in a large diaphragm condenser microphone, sort by price high.
Yeah.
How much can we spend anyway?
I bet the Neumann's at the top
I'm not
of the
getting any
list.
change.
Price high to low. I just want to know.
The real money is in the vintage mics, like the 1950s
Yeah, if you
Neumann.
really have a need to spend a lot of money on a microphone,
Yeah.
that is the way to go. A Telefunken U4748 $16,000.
Wow.
Telefunken U47.
Now, wait, oddly enough, a special order.
Yeah.
We don't stock those? Come on.
Yeah.
You think I'm willing to wait?
Those are nice mics.
What does that microphone do?
Well,
that's
worth
$16,000?
Here's the thing, is that lately, microphones that you can get for a few $100s can do the job 99% of what those things do.
Right.
The real reason that people want microphones is because they either cut or boost certain areas, certain frequencies that make them prone to make particular instruments sound better without having to do any EQ. So you just want, you want
to get a perfect capture right off the bat.
You have a guitar amp, use a Shure 57.
Right.
Because that's the perfect microphone for a guitar amp. You have voice typically needs a large diaphragm condenser microphone. But some of them also have better response in the diaphragm.
Right.
And they can take more pressure. So
most of these multi-$1,000 mics are Neumanns, right? And they got unbelievable response.
Neumanns, yeah. And the thing is, you can scream into them, and they'll still smooth out your frequency response. Whereas the only
that
reason
explains Meatloaf.
The only reason that we can use like $100 large diaphragm condensers for podcasting and it sounds good is because we're not screaming.
Right,
we're just,
we're just using that steady voice.
Yeah.
So Manly Labs Gold Reference multi-pattern microphone, $5,000 on the nose. There you go.
Okay.
All the money's gone.
Sign me up.
Thanks for playing.
There you go.
Oh my goodness, I could not imagine spending that kind of money on a mic. But you know what? I could on a Surface Studio. That is a beautiful piece of equipment.
Right.
It's very aspirational. Just sort of, you almost want to just pet it.
Yeah, they're a lovely looking machine.
They are lovely. I love the starting sequence of getting ready with Serilog, where you get the thing in, and then you define a logger, and then you write a log entry, and it says, this log entry will be written nowhere because you didn't put in a sync. But go ahead and shout all you like.
Well, somebody asked about the performance of Serilog in the discussion after the talk yesterday, and it's a bit counterintuitive, but I think that the most important aspect of performance for a logger is when the thing is turned off.
Right.
Because in production, even if you have a fairly high level of logging, you're still probably collecting only a tenth of what you potentially could if you crank things up to the debug level. And so, so 9 out of those 10 logging statements are doing nothing, and they shouldn't be.
There should be no overhead to them.
No overhead, and it's easy to fall into traps like using volatile state, for example, to track the levels, which means there's a memory barrier, and you've got a performance impact of the thing, even though it does nothing.
Right.
So Serilog's crafted pretty carefully to be
no impact if you're not
well,
syncing.
Yeah. And ideally, your application never has any problems, and you can turn it off altogether and have zero impact. No, one day.
How many levels of logging do you think make sense?
I think levels are maybe less important in the structured world where we have all of these complex logging level schemes because there isn't really a better way in traditional sort of text-based logs to kind of sort out one event from another, whereas with Serilog you've even got things like event types where every single event that's produced by the same logging statement actually has a type that's derived from the format string that produces the event, and so it's not really necessarily. Most things that have some kind of impact on the real world are just they're just events. They're not a level. They're just information. But
that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's a lot more ways to go ahead and sort, and so the leveling thing is maybe not such a central part of it. But
do you treat error handling separately than just logged?
No, although I've seen it. It perplexes me a little bit that there are error handling specific libraries and solutions, because I sometimes have trouble deciding what level an event is, whether it's a warning or an error or just information. I mean, I might call an integration point, some other API. I'm expecting that it might fail, so it failed. I need to log something.
Right.
We in AppVNext took over the Poly project, and that is sort of a retry policy that's thing, and that's a really good, the combination of Poly and Serilog, we use it all the time.
That's cool, because the original developer of Poly, Michael Wolfenden, is actually in Brisbane as well, where I'm from, so we've got good .NET open source
contingent
there. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, it's great because you do generally have levels of things that happen when you're using, let's say, a circuit breaker.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not failing right away. You're retrying, but then after a certain number of retries, now you break the circuit, you open it up, and you don't allow the calls to go through. But you still might want to log. But what you're logging is going to be different than if it actually fails completely. But you still want to know that there was a temporary hiccup.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to know that you retried.
Well,
Right.
I think knowing that something failed is the first step, and I think if many organizations just actually started collecting errors, there would be a step ahead of where a lot of us are
Right.
now.
Sure.
However, the next step, as soon as you've found that something's failed, is you really need to try to understand what was happening and why. And
Right.
I don't think separating error handling from any other kind of logging is going to help with that, because it's more friction and effort to go from the thing that detected your errors to some other system for logs. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I guess then really the something like Serilog, a formal logging system, is the superset. Sometimes folks don't worry about overall logging; they just want to handle transactionally interrupting errors. How about that?
Yeah.
That this is changing the workflow.
I guess the secret is they're really just events in general, and so
Right.
people do use Serilog for things like just metrics, general metrics, and that sort of any event that can be represented
Sure,
as a blob of
and I like
JSON
sort of
or a blob of
status-
data somewhere.
State
Yeah.
of the system. Like, do you have
Yeah.
a sense of where you were at?
Yeah.
It's a very different mindset about what you would log and how you would log it. But
True.
I would always, thinking about Poly and Serilog together is really interesting to me. That I would like to know that something's being retried on a regular basis, even if it ultimately
absolutely, yeah.
completes successfully. It's like
That's it.
Yep.
just the curiosity of why is this happening? Maybe a connection takes longer to negotiate, or
Yeah, or
something along
Something's
those
going to
lines.
fail down the track when
Exactly.
the threshold is
Yeah, just these transient errors that happen for no reason. You don't have control over the network.
Well, I know we've certainly had the experience with stuff like SQL Azure that,
Sure.
it's not up 100% of the time.
Nope.
Sometimes you get a timeout, and a
Yeah.
simple Poly recovery is good, but it's nice to know how often that's happening.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, it's a great combination. And one of the challenges then is when you see a retry or any of those modes coming out of a library like Poly, do you know if you succeeded or failed? Like, can you make that association go, oh, here was the resolution of this?
yeah.
Eventually, you either fail and give up, or it just keeps retrying, or
Yep.
a number of times, or backs off. There's a bunch of ways that you can do it, but I guess it depends on how important that transaction is. If it's not really that important, you can let it go. Then you may not even need a retry. Maybe
Sure.
it's something that's happening on a regular interval.
Just let something go.
Those
let it
things
go.
that happen separated by time are really interesting to try to extract from log data, because you go
Sure.
straight into that stream processing
Yep.
territory, which is always mind-bending for me. I find it always very satisfying if I can actually get something like that to work, but never seems intuitive. Like hooking up RX and those kinds of tricky tools to go and work out what correlates in time.
So what about viewers?
Well, what about viewers? Yeah. Actually,
What a great answer.
Sounded like a
answer.
soap opera ending right there.
Yeah.
yeah.
What
Well,
about
that's that
viewers?
100 different destinations.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing about any kind of log collection scheme is just that you can get to the data. Collecting logs in a log file that sit on a VM that you need to remote to is just, it means that you're going to leave a lot of value in those files untouched. I mean, and help you if you need to request that someone in an ops team goes and logs onto that VM and grabs those log files. So any kind of centralization is good. I've seen people use email, generally semi-successfully. Very small systems can kind of pull error events and things into email as a logging target. There's Seek, the product I work on every day, which is like an HTTP-based web server that collects errors and provides a kind of a query language.
SEQ.
Seek. Well, this is the result of understanding logging as event processing. When I started working on Seek, I thought that I was essentially building a stream processing system.
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
Seek is the type in OCaml, but also F#, I guess, that represents innumerables. And so don't let developers name things is a very good adage to go by. But yeah, there's so much interesting stuff happening in that space. There's a lot of stuff from Microsoft like App Insights, and there's Splunk and Elasticsearch, both used a lot in .NET shops. I think the most important well, it's the most important thing is that you've got something that you can make use of in your environment. So it's
Sure.
like,
The App Insights solution seems very interesting to me. If you're going to run in the cloud, the fact that App Insights does so much with data, if it can.
it's a staggering kind of array of functionality in there. It's some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I just wonder how that sync really works. Like, is there particular tokens or symbols or stuff that you need to feed to App Insights that it knows what to do?
Well, I've looked at this a little bit with another library as well that that Microsoft produces for, I think, Service Fabric logging called Event. Now the name's going to go and slip me. But anyway, yeah, the funny thing is that if you take data from some kind of general purpose library like Serilog, and then you need to go and fit that into something that's got a few more domain smarts like App Insights or any number of kind of collection tools. There is an interesting kind of heuristic mapping layer where it's like, well, if this property is called exception, then we can poke that into the special error field, or if the thing looks like metrics, then we'll treat it as a metric event rather than a log event. And there's some challenges with taking that generic data and mapping it out. But I think the advantage you get from having the general purpose way of collecting it is if you do decide that you've outgrown whatever means you're using to collect logs, or if your app has to run somewhere different, then having a general purpose way of collecting all that information is going to mean you've got more portability.
Sure. Well, and part of you kind of dread the prospect of moving from one logging strategy to another, just because you're going to disrupt a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like switching source code systems. Ugh.
Yeah. Is there much more to do in Serilog land other than more syncs when new products come out?
I've so up behind my house in Brisbane, because I live a little way out of the city, I've got a nice little mountain walk that I can take my lunch break on, and I've been thinking about that on the way up lately. I think that the future in .NET is really getting defined by the push towards better and better and better performance, and I can see in the next wave of .NET technologies there's tons of interesting stuff coming around Core 2.0 in that high performance space that I think we could make use of in Serilog. And it's not that we have a lot of overhead now, but over the stack, once one component has become faster, everything else kind of becomes visible, and there's a drive towards everything having really zero impact and zero allocations. And so there are some non-trivial changes that we could make to kind of streamline the pipeline and do less allocations. And I mean, there are still lots of things we'll obviously have to say no to as well, just to keep the code base sane over time. But yeah, I think that the next wave of Serilog releases is going to be along those lines.
I have a huge expectation coming into Core 2. I think this is going to be a very important version of Core.
Yeah, I do too. I try not to let my expectations get out of control. But so far the time I've spent with it has been really good. I've been porting a few components of Seek from running predominantly on Windows to also running on Linux and Docker. And so far the Core 2.0 stuff that I've run there has pretty much just worked, and it's still a long way from an RTM as far as I understand the schedule. Or I don't know what the schedule is. So
maybe by the time this show's out, or they said it's summer, fall time frame, so it's going to come.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And I pulled up the issues list on GitHub. You only got 8 issues open on a project that's been around this long. Somebody's been very pruny.
Yeah, well,
organized.
And there's also a bit of a policy of closing things that are not really going to get attention. I think the trouble is that if someone comes to the issue tracker and is looking for something to contribute, we really only want the items that actually have a chance of making it into the product to be there.
Hate to have somebody put their time into something
exactly.
that you're not going to accept.
Yeah, exactly.
Unmangle async await stack traces. Yikes.
That's been there for a while. Isn't it horrible reading async stack traces, though?
Oh, terrible. Yeah, this is from 2015. This one's been fought for a while, right?
There was some talk around that time of there being some functionality brought into the framework to do it.
Right.
And
maybe
so that one's
Core 2, right?
It's left open there in hope that we'll get a better experience.
All right, that's fair.
Sometime, but...
Yeah, yes, here you are, reopening it again. I'm not willing to give up just yet. maybe it'll be okay.
Yeah, you also, Richard, don't see the I guess the spread of issues across other repositories. So we've got things like the file sync, where we've had work to do things like file sharing on .NET Core and all sorts of things like that. over time. So the issues list is probably not hugely representative because that repository is just the core Serilog library that has a pipeline and not much else.
And can feel sort of done, right? Like, look at the Serilog syncs to Splunk. That's a trickier piece of code, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting. I got to tell you, just as somebody I'm dealing with humanitarian toolbox and so forth, like just watching how orderly the Serilog GitHub is. Like, you guys are good at this. You should teach a class, of running a coherent open source project that's actually going to live for a while and have a lot of contributors. It's not a simple problem.
No, and following along projects like the CLR and BCL and the Rust project, which is also a brilliantly run open source project, is not necessarily the right thing for a sort of medium-sized .NET project because to run, say, the .NET repositories on GitHub, there's a lot of automation and there's a lot of kind of support that goes into those things, and maybe the same tactics don't apply to smaller libraries. So we've had to develop a few of our own tricks to stay sane.
I guess, especially when you think about Git, you think about Linux, and arguably one of the largest, most complicated, most convoluted, long-running, multi-contributor projects. In some ways, they're better at that.
Yeah.
Right? And Microsoft's benefiting from that than it is a small group of dedicated people, but still with a diverse contributor base, just, with a simpler piece of or smaller scope project. It's harder to manage in that respect.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, my friend. It's very impressive what you've done here. And it's you talk about when I talk about great open source people, like you want to model somebody, model Nicholas Blumhardt. He does good things.
It's not without a lot of help from the co-maintainers and the community now with that one.
And the occasional butt kicking when you make mistakes, because mistakes happen, right?
Well, it's good to have some skin in the game and use a lot of these things in the other projects that I work on. So when I break things, I really upset myself. I pay for it.
Sure, no, it is a project you're using too, right?
Yeah.
Well, Nick, thanks. It's been great talking to you and catching up.
Thank you, Carl.
And maybe we'll see you next year.
Yeah, lovely talking to you guys.
Do this again. 3 years is too long.
Another Oslo Fjord boat cruise.
A few more shrimp I have to peel.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. We'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1. Recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a